been almost 25 years since Ridley Scott unleashed his classic Gladiator onto the world. That film picked up Best Picture at the Oscars, and I have just recently reviewed it. It's one of my all-time favourite movies. I didn't think that the idea of making a sequel was particularly good. When you have a film that is just an absolute classic and is a story that kind of seems like it's been told, when you've got the death of its lead character at the end of the movie, it's like, okay, I feel like we've kind of said all that needs to be said here, but nevertheless, Scott is one of my favourite directors, and I was intrigued enough to be somewhat excited for this film. Now, it follows the story of Lucius, a grown-up Lucius, the young boy from the first film, the son of the character played by Connie Nielsen in the first film, who returns here as the same character. And he fled Rome. Well, he was made to flee Rome for fear of reprisals against her, really. Kill his son, take the throne, because he is obviously the heir. So he was kind of sent away for his own protection, but never kind of really brought back into the fold. And since then, two twisted Looney Tune twin emperors have kind of taken power and are pushing their forces out into the world to, basically take over more territory. And the film opens up with men kind of storming the territory, the castle, so to speak, of where Lucius, under a new name, is now situated. He's living there. And it's like, okay, he gets taken and we know what's going to happen from there. He becomes a gladiator and this, that and the other. It's a story of vengeance. The thing is, the first half hour / 40 minutes of the movie does really feel like it's racing through a rehash of the first film. So I wasn't all that emotionally invested. One of the things that they do in the film is play the Lucius character as, well, not Lucius. And the thing is, I went into this film knowing it was Lucius because every piece of advertising and publicity has told us this is Lucius. So when we get to a certain point in the film where it's revealed that he is Lucius, I feel like not knowing that information going in would have been better for me, better for my viewing experience. But hey-ho, there you go. I'm sorry if that's a spoiler telling you that he's Lucius, but I knew this going in, having seen really just the publicity stuff. So this was common knowledge as far as I'm aware. So I feel like that the first half hour, 40 minutes, really is kind of going through the beats, the story beats of the first one to get this guy into the Colosseum. And throughout all that stuff, it looks pretty. The action sequences are really spectacular. So purely from like an action junkie standpoint, I get quite a lot of adrenaline pumping action scenes throughout that time. But none of it really kind of connects to me on a truly emotional level. Until, as I say, we get to the Colosseum. Now, once we get to the Colosseum, once we've got all of that nonsense out of the way, the stuff that the tick box list, so to speak, we need to get this guy into the Colosseum, fighting as a gladiator, tick box, boom, get him there. All that stuff, okay, fine, entertaining, but not spectacular. But once we're there, once we're at the Colosseum, and he meets his mum, or sees that his mum's still there, gets caught up in the politics of what's going on with the emperors and what's going on with this character played by Denzel Washington, who is essentially the Oliver Reed character from the first film. I mean, he's not actually that character, but he plays the same kind of purpose, same kind of function, so to speak, as the Oliver Reed character. Once all the politics kicks off and gets into gear, I became a lot more invested. The film became a lot more interesting. On the subject of Denzel Washington, he's got a much bigger role in this film than I'd anticipated. Like I say, I thought he was going to be popping up, fulfilling that Oliver Reed role, get a really big. You don't get much bigger than Denzel Washington to fill that role. Boom, brings the gravitas. He'll get a handful of scenes that lend weight, give impact. But no, he's a huge character in this. He's quite a big character. I was surprised by that. He also chews up the scenery. Whenever Denzel Washington is on screen in this film, he chews up the scenery big time, along with the two guys who play the emperors. So we've got, like I say, we've got these twin emperors, and I looked this up after the film because I thought, is this Ridley Scott doing his, we've got to one-up the previous film? Is it just Ridley Scott being a bit like Ridley Scottish and just, being a lot more colourful than perhaps he needs to be? And as it turns out, these guys were real, were genuine, and the time frame kind of works as well. If you go, again, as I said in my review for the first film, lots of liberties taken with history. But there are elements in this film that are tied into the genuine history of these characters. These guys exist. They were both emperors. They were twin brothers, and anything else that I would tell you after that would be a bit of a spoiler. So, but yeah, they are based on genuine historical emperors, and the timing between their reign and Marcus Aurelius and Commodus, which we got in the first film, is about right. Anyway, as I say, Joseph Quinn and Fred Hershinger, who play these twin emperors, are really great. I would have liked more on-screen time from them, to be honest. Totally wacky, totally off the face. And them playing off against Denzel Washington's character as well does create for some lunatic antics on screen. Paul Mescal plays Lucius, and he does okay here in the role. I like him. I think he's got enough gravitas, enough charisma to kind of soldier along in the role. But you can't help, and that goes for everything really in this film, you can't help but compare it to the first one. You're always going to compare it to the first one. And in terms of charisma, like man's man charisma, very little touches what Russell Crowe brought to that first Gladiator film. So you're always going to feel like whoever it was, whoever was going to step up to the plate was always going to be fighting a losing battle. Now, as it happens, he does a pretty good job. I warmed to the guy over the course of the film. Like I say, had they given him a bit of a different kind of backstory at the start, instead of just essentially trying to give him the same character journey as Maximus for the first kind of act of the film, then I may have warmed to him a lot more. He may have made more of an impact. Now, as I say, once we get to the Colosseum, once we get to Rome, things do take more of an interesting turn, shall we say, because one, he meets his mother. He realises his mother is still alive. His mother realises he's still alive. But he's in conflict with the man that she is now married, played by Pedro Pascal. Only this character that Pedro Pascal plays isn't really a villain. You totally get why Lucius would hate this guy, and yet you totally get why Lucilla would love this guy. And so that creates real interest. That's the heart of the movie, I think. Once you get to that stuff and your allegiances become torn, your affections are to different people, several people at the same time, that's when the real drama comes out of it. That's when the real story kind of comes out of it. And that's when I became greatly interested in what was going on. It made the action sequences have a lot more power to them from that point on. There's a lot of big themes in the movie, given the world that it takes place in, as with the first film. I don't think those themes are as clearly defined as the first film, but I do think it has a lot to say about duty and allegiance. Who are you going to pledge your allegiance to, and what is your duty to that cause, to that person, it might even be yourself, your beliefs, all that kind of stuff. what is your duty in that? And I think, yeah, through these different characters, we get to see how their sense of duty, whether it's to themselves or something else, plays out across the board and how it affects their moral stance, their principles. The Colosseum stuff as well has been one-upped, so we get into like bat poop crazy kind of stuff going on, some of which you'll see in the trailers. You'll be able to like catch glimpses of that in the trailers. Even when I saw the trailers, I was kind of like, okay, is that not going to be a little bit too out there? But in the context of the film, I went with it. There's certain things that happen when I'm just like, it's elaborate. Getting some of the things together that they needed to get together in order to make that happen. But I'm buying it. I'm going along with it. There are a lot of nods and callbacks to the original film, which generally in movies, in sequels, I don't like. It tends to rub me the wrong way because all it does is remind you of a better version of the film you're watching. But I do think that most of the nods here are earned. They're kind of built into the fabric of this world that was created with the first film. I think the characters that are involved here were impacted in such a huge way by the likes of Maximus that it makes sense that certain things he'd said or stood for would be kind of buried into their psyches, into their subconscious. And yeah, so it didn't rub me the wrong way. There was a couple of moments, couple of lines where maybe I was like, okay, maybe you could lose that one. But for the most part, the callbacks worked. So ultimately, this is an inferior film to the first one. But the first one, for me, as I say, is an absolute 5-star classic. I love it. I love everything about it. I would have expected this to be a considerable drop-off, maybe to the point of like saying it's a 3-star film. But actually, I was pleasantly surprised. I was very surprised by it, and just by the level of fun I had with it. Certainly, like I say, once you hit that 40-minute mark and I start getting into the politics and the crazy characters, I went along for the ride and enjoyed every minute of it. And yeah, it's not as good as the original because it's not as original. There's bits that kind of rehash it in order to get us where we need to be. And for that, it loses a point. But in terms of, grand scale action, period piece epics, you're going to struggle, really, to find anyone that can match Ridley Scott in terms of how he directs this kind of stuff. So I had fun with this. I had a lot of fun with this. And it's sat well with me overnight to the point where I'm like, you know what? I'd quite happily go back to the cinema and watch this again. But what about you? Have you seen this film? If not, are you intending on going to watch it? And do you rate the first one all that much? If maybe you're not even interested in this if you don't like the first one. Obviously, I don't imagine you would be if you don't like the first one. But yeah, if you like the first one, thoughts on this one? Leave them down below. Thank you for watching this review, and until next time, cracking.